I want to go directly into the challenges that we have. And these challenges that we have as African people are not limited to the Spanish-speaking African or the Latino African or the continental African or the American African here in the 50 states. Those of us who are the offspring of the victims of the worst human tragedy in recorded history. We have a lot of schisms amongst us, a lot of isms. We got light skin supremacy problems. We got dark skin supremacy problems. We got English language speaking supremacy problems. We got Spanish speaking language supremacy problems. And what's ironic about them all is, or what I find to be so interesting, is that as African people in the diaspora, we tend to focus more on where the slave ship brought our ancestors as opposed to where the slave ship picked them up from. There was no place called America 400 years ago. There was no place called Puerto Rico 400 years ago. There was no New York City, Philadelphia, LA, Oakland. There was no Colombia, Venezuela. There was no Dominican Republic. Those names come later. What were you before Puerto Rico was called Puerto Rico? What were you before New York City was called New York City? What were you before Cuba was called Cuba? You were an African. All of us were. But in our sojourn across the world, the white power structure played a game that it still plays amongst African people today, and that is the game of divide and conquer and separate and rule. And they put the light against the dark, no matter what the language was. They put the Latino against the American African. They put the continental African against us. They put the Caribbean African against each other. Our brothers and sisters in Australia, they made us think we had far less in common than we actually do, exploiting superficial differences. And what makes it so interesting is the very person you don't like because they speak another language or have a different complexion or their hair texture is a little different from yours may very well be your cousin. Y'all may very well come from the same traditional African kingdom. Y'all might both be Yoruba. Y'all might both be Igbo. Y'all might both be Maasai. Y'all might both be Zulu. You might both be Swazi. You might both be Khoi. You might both be Xhosa. Look how ridiculous we are as African people to be fighting each other when truth of the matter is we may all have very well come from the very same village, our ancestors that is. So we have to get over it, and we have to get over it quick. One of the things I always talk about when I'm dealing with Pan-Africanism is to make sure people understand what Pan-Africanism is and what Pan-Africanism is not. And I'm going to go into that right now. Pan-Africanism is the black man's oldest formal political ideology. Some people would trace its birth to the Haitian Revolution, which began on my birthday, August the 21st, but many years before I was born in 1791. Some people would trace Pan-Africanism to the Chicago Conference on Africa that took place in 1893, I want to say it was. Some people would trace Pan-Africanism to other events. I would say Pan-Africanism is as old as Africa because we are the first people to circumnavigate the planet. We were the only people on the planet all by ourselves for at least 250,000 years. Nobody else. If we don't leave Africa, white people never evolve. If we don't leave Africa, Chinese never evolve. If we don't leave Africa, you never get an East Indian, you never get a Native American. The African is the mother and father of all human groups. Those groups come from us. They are in our DNA. And this is indisputable now. We've had the Harvard Genome Project. We had all kinds of research, black and white research, that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Africa is the cradle of civilization, that the black woman is the mother of all civilization, and the black man is the father of all civilization. There is no humanity without us. Every group on the planet comes from us. We're the only people who came from God. Everybody else came from us. Which is interesting because when you get into the religious conversations, and as Pan-Africanists, we don't take no issue with religion. We believe in freedom of worship. I don't care if you're a Hebrew. I don't care if you're a Christian. I don't care if you're a Seventh-day Adventist, a Jehovah's Witness, a Muslim. It makes no difference to me. Your religion is only my concern to the extent that it interferes with your ability to struggle for African liberation. If your Christianity does not stop you from struggling for African liberation, I have no issue with your Christianity. If your Islam does not stop you from struggling for African liberation, I have no issue with your Islam. If you being a Jehovah's Witness or a Methodist or an Episcopalian doesn't stop you from struggling for African liberation, I have no issue with you. But on the flip side, if you say you cannot struggle for African liberation because your God doesn't allow you to see color, we have a problem. I can't struggle with you. If you tell me you can't work with other African people because they haven't been saved, or they haven't taken their shahada, or they haven't undergone a particular religious experience, if you say you have to be of my own belief in order for me to struggle with you, I have a problem, because now your religion just became the enemy of African liberation. And let us be real clear. No weapon has been greater. No weapon has been used more against African people at home, which is Africa, and abroad in the diaspora, than religion. It has been used to make us inferior. It has been used to brainwash us against who our true enemies are. It has been used to make us adopt a politically ridiculous, colorblind agenda. How can you afford to not see color when you've been victimized by your race your entire experience outside of the diaspora? Who benefits by African people not seeing color? Who benefits by you not putting African people first? Always ask yourself that question when somebody gives you any set of circumstances. Who benefits from this? When a European came into Africa, he had the Bible, we had all the resources. By the time he left, he controlled all the resources and we had the Bible. Napoleon Bonaparte, and I'm no fan of his, of course he lost in the Haitian Revolution to Toussaint L'Ouverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines. And Napoleon said, religion is what keeps the poor man from killing the rich one. I'm not against religion, but your religion must be an instrument of liberation, or it is a waste of time. I was raised Muslim and Christian, so I know all about the church. I know all about the masjid. And if I'm going to be plainly honest with you, there's no religion on the face of the earth that serves African liberation. And you cannot be a Pan-Africanist if you still got that white Jesus hanging up in your house, in your dorm room, in your car, or in your Bible. Because before we can liberate ourselves politically, before we can liberate ourselves economically, before we can liberate ourselves socially, before we can liberate ourselves culturally, we have to liberate ourselves psychologically. I want you to hear me well, Puerto Rican Africans. I want you to hear me well, American Africans. I want you to hear me well, all my Latino Africans, my continental Africans, my American Africans. There is no liberation for our race that does not begin with psychological liberation until you change the way that you think about yourself, your people, and your future. Until you change the way that you think about who we are, and what we must become, you change nothing else about us. Reparations is a hot topic right now, ain't it? Everybody's talking about reparations this like it's some new thing. Reparations grew out of the Pan-Africanist movement. It was Pan-Africanism that gave birth to reparations, not YouTube or the YouTube opportunists. It was Pan-Africanists who gave birth to reparations. But guess what? The US government can give us $1 trillion. The French government can give us $1 trillion. The Italian government, the German government, the Belgian government, they could give us $1 trillion. But guess what? Without psychological liberation, I don't care how much money you get from the outside, until you change the dynamic in the inside, nothing else will change. That's why the most honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, who gave us the red, black, and green flag and the largest black movement in modern history, Mr. Garvey said, don't take the kinks out of your hair, black sister. Take the kinks out of your mind. I'm going to get to the weaves and perms later. Because we cannot expect little black girls to grow up with pride. We cannot expect little black girls to grow up with self-respect while adult black women imitate Caucasians. Now, some of you have naturally curly hair. No problem with that. Some of you have naturally straight hair. No problem with that. We got African brothers and sisters in New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, in the South Pacific. They're naturally blonde and they have naturally blue eyes. Some of our Puerto Rican African brothers and sisters got green and blue, and our Cuban brothers and sisters and Dominican brothers and sisters got green and blue. I got nieces and nephews who got green and blue eyes. So that's not the issue. If that's your natural color, so be it. But for those of you who have the original ancient skin color and the original ancient hair color and the original ancient hair texture and the original ancient phenotype of our great-grand ancestors on the Nile Valley of Africa, why would you dare snuff that out? Why would you dare kill the greatness in your DNA? One of the greatest victories of white supremacy is that it made black people want to imitate their oppressor. And most of us now still want to imitate our oppressor. And every last one of you in here right now, I don't care if you speak English, Spanish, Portuguese. I don't care if you speak Wolof or Swahili. Every last one of you, after you graduate from Pace University, after you get your bachelor's and your master's and your doctorate, you are either going to be a benefit to African people or a detriment to African people. You will either be a plus for your people or you will be a minus. You will either be a freedom fighter for African people or you will be a part of the coonocracy. Some of you can't wait to join the coonocracy. Some of you go to sleep dreaming of being a coon. You can't wait for the white power structure to draft you and offer you a job to sell out your people. You got coons all over the world. You got Ghanaian coons, you got New York City coons, you got Puerto Rican coons. You got all kind of African people selling out their people around the world. But let me get back to what Pan-Africanism is. Point number one, and these are in no particular order. I will be authoring a book on the principles of Pan-Africanism because we need that. Number one, all African people are one family. All African people are one family. Whether you in Puerto Rico speaking Spanish, whether you are in Senegal speaking Wolof, whether you in South Africa speaking Zulu, whether you are in Kenya speaking Maasai, whether you are in Brazil, the largest African community outside of the continent is Brazil. They speak Portuguese. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you got the straight hair or the curly hair or the nappy hair. Whether you got the blue, black, purple, beautiful skin of our ancient grand ancestors or whether you have light skin. Whether you are Muslim or Christian, whether you pledge allegiance to this flag or that flag, we are one African people. We are one African family. We are one African race. Now here's the kicker for Pan-Africanists. We identify as being African before anything else. Nothing supersedes your Africanity.